Okay, with Greg McWhorter, Sanguine Deposit is the short film. You are the producer and you're also the writer of the script as well, right?
I was the writer, the actor, and I did a lot with the film. I worked hand in hand with my director. I didn't take an assistant director credit, but he really designed the shots, but we really worked hand in hand on it, what we
Gotcha.
wanted to achieve.
So tell me about like what's the seed of the idea? Where did you come? Like, have you made a short film before this one, or
So I've been kind of around the periphery of film my whole life. I used to work for a television station as a master control board operator and chief tape librarian. And I used to work for people like Roy Rogers, Dale Evans, Pat Buttram, who was Mr. Haney on Green Acres. So I've kind of been around film people, being here in Southern California. I have been involved in some small films and done some acting, both on stage and on film. But I'm primarily a writer. I've got two books out of horror and one book out that's general fiction. And I'm working on another general fiction book right now. And so I've always had a love of film. I've watched films from around the world. I love films from all countries, and I have a real analytical eye. So yeah. So to make a long story short, I had an idea to make a film, and do you want me to go into it a little bit?
no? I just want to jump back for a second. But you're also a doctor, right?
Yes, I have a doctorate in education.
Okay.
I just retired from over 20 years in the field of education.
And you said you worked for Mr. Rogers,
No, Roy Rogers, the
Roy
cowboy.
Rogers. So that's
Yeah,
going way back. Okay.
yeah, Roy
You're a
Rogers.
relatively young guy. You talked about Green Acres and Roy Rogers. That's like in the 70s, I guess, right?
Well, it was during the 80s. I just happened to live at the right place at the right time where I was around Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. You know, they were married, so I was around their family a lot. And I got to do printing for them for their museum. But I also went to high school with their granddaughter, and I was also their head busboy at a restaurant where I got to serve them all the time. So I was around the family a lot. They were where I grew up in, it's called Apple Valley, California.
Yeah.
The family was just like they were like the royalty up there. So, and
Good.
I happened to, my dad and I both got to know them a bit.
Gotcha. Okay, so talk about let's dig into this film here. So
Yeah.
yeah, is there a bigger first of all, is there a bigger story here? Is this a proof of concept to a bigger film?
Not originally. So, I got to be honest with you. Like I said, I'm a lover of films. I love silent films, and I really wanted to make a film. And I worked with a guy who had directed many student films. And I knew I was going to retire soon. I didn't have very many more years left at the school district I was at, and where he was teaching media arts. And I thought to myself, okay, I got to approach him with an idea that is going to be an easy idea that he won't mind working with me to pull off. So I came up with the idea for doing a silent film so we didn't have to worry about sound. And I thought, well, and if we shoot in black and white too, it's a silent film. It's supposed to be set in the past. We shoot in black and white. We don't have to worry about color. So all we have to worry about is our cinematography and our lighting. And I'm kind of always been going to antique stores and swap meets. So I figured I could source all the props, everything. And it just, in my head, it all made sense. So then I kind of started developing a horror story to go with that, with the idea of it being possibly the first slasher film ever made back in 1930.
Okay.
And so I try to play it off a little bit like it's almost like a found film. And I even wrote up a whole thing for film festivals saying, "Hey, I'm Dr. McWhorter, and I found this in the wilds of Peru. It was in some chicken farm, and this guy was selling old
Yeah.
movies that he had, saved for decades. And I found this film. So we try to play it off. But yeah, so basically, I went to my director with this idea. I said, "Look, I'm making this as easy for you as possible. Um, Black and white, silent. I got the story. I had some of the ideas for the scenes, and then he and I worked together to develop other scenes. So that's why I say it was real kind of 50-50 because I never would have gotten it done without him. So
Yeah.
it's very crucial to getting it done. But it was really a 50-50 collaboration, which is unusual because, sometimes with directors, it's got to be more their vision. And I was glad that he saw my vision and it meshed with his vision, and we were able to get it done.
That's Robert Del Campo, who's the
Yes.
director. Okay. So you're like, and you're, but you, what, did you always want to act in the film?
Yeah, so that was the other thing is because I have done acting in my life, and even though I'm more of a writer than an actor, I don't pursue acting that hard. I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, and if I'm going to put my money into it, because it's quite an investment, I thought, you know what, I should write a story where I am the lead actor too, so that way we don't have to worry too much about the budget. I've got the story and I can do the acting, and then we can just worry about hiring extras as we need them. And that's pretty much what we did. So our film was made on a shoestring budget. We cut a lot of corners. It was a real Little Rascals approach to filmmaking
Yeah.
almost because we, really wanted to save money, and it was our first film working together. So our whole film, even though it's a 15-minute film and you've seen it, it cost about 3 grand to make, not
Okay. Of
including time or labor or editing or anything.
course.
That
Yeah.
was Robert Del Campo's skill. The editing, the cinematography, and then my skill was more focused on casting and props and continuity and the story. But yeah, just bringing those things together and putting our free time into it, we kept the budget at about 3 grand, which everyone tells me is phenomenal.
So you didn't need sound on set because it's like a silent film, right?
Yeah,
So
so
you
that
did
was a
sound
big.
design afterwards. And so tell me about like the idea, like so in terms of like the grainy kind of footage, like the old style silent films, you did that all in post production to kind of give it that vibe?
Absolutely, yeah. So that was Robert's magic. Um, yeah, Robert, he knew what I was looking for. I mean, we talked it out, but I told him, I said I wanted to look old, and he knew how to do that. He's making student films for like 20 years and won a lot of awards with I believe, I want to get this right, I believe it's the Panasonic Student Awards. He's been winning for like 20 years with them and flying all over the world to accept
Yeah.
awards. And so he knew what to do. He was an experienced filmmaker. This was just his first non education project, pretty much his first self venture along with me. So it was a good thing for both of us to cut our teeth with. And you mentioned the sound. Did you notice we played a lot of blues music?
Yeah, exactly.
So that was another way we cut corners. So instead of paying anyone for licensing, all the songs that we used became public domain as of this year, as of January 1st. So we made sure that, and we also didn't have to pay for mechanical rights because the songs that we used actually came from my collection. I collect old 78 blues records. So we wanted to find songs that would fit with the film, sound good with the film, so they had to have at least a certain quality of sound. I mean, so you can tell there's a varying difference as you listen to the soundtrack, but we tried to get my records that sounded good and fit with the scene, and we tried to do the best we can, and I think we did a pretty good job with it. But all the music that we used was royalty free and mechanical rights free, so we didn't have to pay anyone for that. It just came all from my record collection. So
That's
another
pretty cool.
savings.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess it's like a public domain, I guess, right? So
As of January 1st, and we released our film January 25th, so we're good.
so tell me about the other like the like so you got you're kind of the lead guy and you're like did they even have that? I was curious when I was watching the film. Do they even have train hoppers anymore? Is that still a
Yeah.
thing?
Oh, actually, yeah, it's still a big thing. My kids, youngest son and daughter, they're both in their 30s now, but they haven't done it too much lately. But about 10 years ago, they were still train hopping. So,
Really?
and they tell me that they still have friends that train hop that'll come visit them. They'll tell me, "Hey, I got somebody rolling into town. I got to go pick them up from the train yard," and I'll be like, "Oh, okay." And so yeah, there's still kids that train hop. A lot of times it's either runaways, kids from broken homes, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Not really kids too much doing it just for the thrill of doing it. My kids kind of did it for the thrill of doing it, and they saw a lot of terrible things on the road.
I was gonna
But
say, like it seems dangerous on many levels.
it is. There's a lot of fights that go on. My son actually witnessed somebody get murdered. There's still a lot of there's actually hobo gangs, they call them, and they ride the rails. I forget the name, but there's one specific gang that's what they do. They ride the rails, And if you you're kind of like Hell's Angels. If you get in their way, they'll mess with you. You leave them alone, they'll leave you alone usually. But yeah, there's still a lot of that goes on today. But of course, our film's set in the 1930s. We kind of relied on the whole history of the Great Depression and the hobos of that time.
Hobos. Are you even allowed to say that word now?
Yeah, my son was telling me that there's a difference between tramps, drifters, and hobos,
Okay.
and I'm not, it's not my thing, but he says a tramp is somebody who rides the rails and they try to like steal along the way, like steal a chicken from a yard or steal vegetables from somebody's garden or whatever they can get. Whereas a hobo is willing to work for their living as they go across. Like, hey, I'll tell you what, I'll pull your weeds for an hour if you'll make me a dinner, that kind of thing. So there's even
They're
amongst
nomads, I guess. They don't have homes, right?
exactly even
Yeah.
amongst the people that do that, a hobo is supposedly a little bit higher on the echelon of class, I
Okay.
guess, within that
And
system.
what's a drifter?
I don't know the difference. I'm sorry, but
No,
I
no, no, I
think
was curious. A drifter is probably somebody like that.
doesn't know what they're
Uh,
doing, probably.
yeah. Maybe someone who just like who by happenstance is doing it, like they're running away from something like abuse or etc. Right? So
That's what I would guess. Yeah. Whereas a tramp, I would think is some tramps and hobos. I think ascribe to that culture and they want to be nomadic.
so what? Yeah, exactly. So what inspired you to what kind of gave you this idea? Like talking to your kids about it, or I was curious.
Probably subconsciously, just my own interactions with train hoppers. But where I live here in Southern California, we have the Paris Train Museum, and it's hundreds of it. I don't know how many acres, I shouldn't say, but it's a huge place where they have all these old trains they've collected from the 1800s to about the 1960s, and they're very easy to work with. So as far as like set location, it was really easy to film there. The boxcar in the beginning scene where I jump out of the boxcar, they had that on location. They keep it sealed though; they don't want people going into them. So we paid them to shoot there at their museum, and they went out there with us and took bolt cutters and opened it up, and we were able to shoot there as long as we wanted to, which was nice. So a lot of the scenes of me like walking the tracks. Or jumping off the train. Those are all at the Paris Train Museum. We owe them a huge debt. This film probably wouldn't have worked as well without
Yeah,
all the stuff we got.
I was going to ask you how do you legitimize it, and you just answered the question, right? So
Yeah.
that's cool. So, but is that out? That's all outside?
It's all outside because it's a big property. So a lot of the
Yeah,
trains sit outside, and the more restored ones or the older ones do sit inside train barns. But
yeah.
they have a lot that just sit outside on the property, and then they actually have it's a working train yard. So they actually have a little train that goes around like they do Thomas the Tank Engine for kids, and they do all kinds of different holiday events to bring families out to the train museum. But it's huge. And it's beautiful.
So let me ask you about your character because he does have an arc, I guess, right? But I'm curious, what are we're supposed to root for this guy in a strange way.
Not well. That's the funny thing, and I know my director and I kind of both had a hard time with that because he really believed, well, we need a strong protagonist, and I wanted to make a film that was kind of like the video nasties in Britain, where they're just ugly films where there's no clear protagonist,
Yeah,
and
like they're anti-heroes, like in television in the last 25 years, I guess.
yeah, and my guy is kind of an anti-hero. He's a guy you don't root for, and I love there was somebody who reviewed, I think it was actually one of your feedback people from your feedback video was saying that they loved how my character is this mean kind of nasty character and he's doing all these bad things and you don't really root for him, so you're kind of like waiting to see, well, what happens, is he gonna win in the end or what, and you don't really like the guy and you don't really build up sympathy for him, which is kind of what I wanted, which my director and I kind of had a little bit of different thoughts on that, but he kind of went with it. And I said, just go with it. I think it'll work. And then the guy that we ended up using, who ends up killing me, one of your reviewers said, "Well, he's really the protagonist. He's a bad guy too, but
Yeah.
he ends the life of this bad guy, which in a way is a good thing. So he's an anti-hero protagonist, where my guy is just kind of an antagonist all the way through.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something different. I don't like writing the tropes. Like I said, I've written a couple of horror books, and I try to avoid the tropes in my horror stories. So I try to write. I tend to write very complicated psychological thrillers, and that's kind of what I was trying to do here in a 15-minute film.
Yeah. Well, like yeah, he's kind of a sad guy too, right? Where like he's drinking and there's like a moment where he goes to church and you're thinking that he's there for the right reasons or whatever you think
Maybe he'll
about
get redemption. Yeah.
organized religion, but basically, yeah, but then it's the opposite, right? So,
Yeah, and that's kind of what we decided to do. And some of that was my directors. My director said, "Okay, if we're going to do this guy and he's going to be a nasty guy, we
yeah.
got to come up with scenes where he has maybe opportunities to redeem himself, but then
Yeah.
he kind of diverges." So the church scene was really at the insistence of my director, and I'm glad we did it because the church scene I think came off really well. And especially with the extras that we had. I don't know how close you watched the film, but the little girl's face when she like smells me in the pews is this, smelly hobo.
Yeah.
And even my wife was one of the extras next to me, and the looks they gave her to me are just classic. And that was the other thing with it being a silent film is we wanted not only my acting but the extras acting to be exaggerated. So that was hard for me at first because I remember my director kept telling me, Greg, you need to over exaggerate. You need to be more expressive with your
Yeah.
eyes, your manner, because it's a silent film.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that was
that's what it is,
different.
right?
Yeah, it's a different mindset.
Did you go like method and just not shower for a few weeks?
I did a little bit. I showered every day, but what I did is for continuity, I would every time I knew we were going to shoot, I would go at least 3 to 4 days without shaving because and that would drive my wife nuts because she likes me clean shaven. So that was hard for her because I would start getting all kind of woolly and kind of grungy looking, and my hair would start getting crazy, and because I wouldn't really comb my hair much either, and she would be like, "Oh, you got a film shoot coming up, huh?" Yeah.
What did your wife think of the experience?
My wife, I got to say, like I said, we've only been married 6 years, but she's an incredible woman. She doesn't try to stifle my creative side at all. She actually enjoys that I'm creative. She's not very creative, so she's really not the actress type or a writer or anything like that. But she supports everything I do. And it was nice that she was able to act in my film. She's told me that she will never act in a film for me again, but
Oh, she's
because
in the film.
she is. So in the church pew, when I first sit down the church pew, she is the lady sit with the hat sitting next
Okay.
to me who
Yeah.
looks at me and goes, "Ew, he's smelly," and she kind of starts sliding down.
Well, she's effective. And she did a good job as the like quote, I guess, actor, background performer. But she
Yeah,
does have a moment, I guess, right?
yeah, she did I think she did a great job, but it's not her thing. Acting
Yeah.
is very uncomfortable to her.
So you kind of end the film, quote unquote. That's what I was asking you of like is there a bigger story here? Because you end it with a question mark.
We did that on purpose. Just
Yeah.
that was actually more my director than me because at the end, what I originally wanted was, kind of our Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde slasher.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted the viewers to realize that all the bank deposit boxes, they're all the boxes are owned by him. He's paid rent for all these boxes, and
Yeah.
he's storing body parts in all of them. So I was telling my director originally, as he's walking away, maybe we should see like blood dripping down out of the box where he's just put my head after he's closed it.
Yeah.
And my director instead came up with the idea at the end of having that Easter egg where you see my head in the box and my eye moves like could I come back as some kind of zombie or something? But yeah, we did that just to be
Well, then again, you would be all the heads in the
parts and
room,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, yeah. So we did that just to be fun and just to mess with the audience a little bit. And but no, there's no thought to continue this story. It was more the story, like I said, it was kind of a collaboration between my director and I to see if we could work together. We started to go into pre-production for another project, which we've kind of halted on. So I'm not sure if we're going to be able to work together or not. But I do have some plans to for a second film. So I think there will be one that'll be out hopefully by next year. But we'll see what happens, whether it's with my same director, Robert Del Campo, or not. I'm not sure.
So the guy's like he's a serial killer then, basically.
Well, yeah. So my character, who you don't like throughout the whole
No,
thing,
no, no, no. The guy who like the guy
no,
who yeah who kills
yeah.
him.
I'm just giving you the setup. So
Yeah,
my character is just kind of my character is a killer, but he's not a serial killer. He just kills out of like what he thinks is perceived necessity. Like he killed the guy in the box car to steal his stuff, take his
yeah.
shoes. But the other guy is a serial killer. And so here's a killer who's run up against a serial killer, and who's the toughest, strongest of the two. My character ends up getting killed by him,
Yeah.
which shows you that no matter how big and bad you think you are, there's always somebody else out there bigger and badder than you. Or, as my director likes to say, you reap what you sow.
I thought the guy was like just kills bad people. He's like Dexter Morgan, like from like he just kills the bad people.
It's open to interpretation,
Yeah,
but if you remember the scene where the girl's on the street and you see all the missing people, the posters of the missing people,
yeah.
there's like kids on there. Well, kids are
Okay.
pretty innocent, so
Oh, so he's
we
a bad motherfucker. Pardon my French. He's bad.
he's bad is the way we were looking at it,
Yeah.
but it's open to interpretation. You if we did go further, create a second film out of this. With that same guy, who his name is Marshall Thomas, fantastic guy. He's good friends with Butch Patrick, who is Eddie Munster on the Munsters, and he was actually in a video with Eddie Munster. Yeah, if we did another film with him, I mean, we could always do the Dexter approach in the 30s, but we have no plans for that right now. He's Marshall is a great guy, but he's getting a little bit older, and it's getting a
Yeah.
little bit hard for him to do some
Gotcha.
acting.
So what's the tone wise? What's your next film project going to be? Is it going to be like this? Is it going to be like a horror kind of
Yeah,
tribute
well,
movie or?
I have a film all written out, and I've started doing pre-production on it. I've started doing some of the scene planning, and it's basically it's a psychological terror film, but it's set in modern times, so it'll be color with sound. And if I do it right, it's again it'll be me as the lead actor. But it's basically I don't want to give away too much about it, but it's a guy who is losing his mind and he's unwilling to admit that he killed his wife. And it's kind of like a day in the life of this guy as he's losing his mind after killing his wife and what that's like. And then what he does at the end, his mind starts playing psychological tricks on him. The morality in his subconscious starts attacking him basically. So without giving too much away, every time something supernatural seems to happen. Is it really supernatural? But in the end, the viewer finds out, oh, it's his mind creating the trouble. If that
Gotcha.
makes sense.
Cool. So you're kind of in the super not like you're in it's different, but it's kind of in the same kind of realm, I guess, in a sense.
Psychological terror with like a
Yeah.
supernatural twist that kind of ends up being Scooby Doo, if that
Scooby-Doo.
makes
Okay.
sense.
Well,
Yeah.
congratulations. It seems like you learned a lot. This like in a lot of ways, this was kind of your film school in some regards. Like meaning that this seems to be a big learning experience for you.
I think it was for both of us. I don't want to diminish Robert's contributions. He learned a lot too because even though he's been making student films for 20 years, he said that he really pushed himself making Sanguine Deposit. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
right here.
okay. You look like you froze for a minute. But he had to learn like Unreal Engine. So I know we're getting to some closing here,
Yeah.
but one of the hardest things for us, which I mentioned in my interview that you guys posted, was that with the changing landscape, I was a punk rocker in the '80s, and I knew the area well, so I knew where like there were good alleys and places to shoot. When we went to those locations, because of gentrification, either the alleys all had these colorful murals in them because they let kids come in and paint them up,
Yeah.
or they were blocked off for homeless. They didn't want the homeless to live in those alleys, so there was new gates in all these places. So all the places I thought would be great filming locations were very disappointing because of gentrification. So for some of the scenes, or like the scene in the end where I attacked the guy in the alley, Robert had to learn Unreal Engine to make the alley basically. So when you
Gotcha.
see that, it's not a real alley. But I think he did a great job because I think if you look at some of the films from the 1930s that are shot, on sets, I think it
Yeah.
looks just as good as the set. Even though it's computer generated. So
No, it's funny. Like we went full circle. You kind of went full circle on the film experience.
yeah,
Like you modernized it to make it old school, right?
we had to, and that was the thing about it is we didn't want to limit ourselves too much. I mean, some people think, and it's been hard for us with the film festival circuit because some people look at our film and they go, "Oh, it's a black and white silent." And I don't think they even watched the whole thing. And then
Yeah,
there's other people who've watched it and got mesmerized by it and have told me, "You guys nailed silent. You guys did everything right."
yeah,
And we've even fooled people with some of our computer generated stuff. They've said, "What about the?" You know, I've had people like nitpick me. What about this scene? What about that scene? And then they're surprised at how many scenes we kind of had to fake.
yeah.
But we tried to stick to using real locations, real props, and everything as legitimate as we could. It was just towards the end of the film, it was just like to get it done, we had to use the Unreal Engine.
Of course. Well, listen, from where I sit, I watch a lot of people trying to make black and white silent films. I've
Mhm.
maybe seen 100 of them in the last like three,
Oh,
4 years.
new ones, yeah.
They don't work.
Oh,
Yours
okay.
works, and
Nice.
because it's about nailing the tone, but also making sure that there's a story as well. I think people try to use it as a gadget, as a gimmick, like, oh, we're just going to do this silent film. You made a film, and it just happened to be this style. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And like I said, it's been 50-50. There's
Yeah,
been amazing people like you who've come forward and said, I get it. You guys
yeah,
have done a great job. But then I think there's a lot of people that are still they're still not used to silent films or haven't gotten into them. You know, silent films and black and white for younger audiences are still tough for them to get into. It takes them a while to really get their head around, okay, this is a different period, different time. And sometimes that's tough for people and they're not willing to always give it a chance. So thank you for your kind words. I
yeah.
appreciate them.
All right. On that note, I want to see your next film. I wanted you to keep making movies.
Definitely. And like I said, I've
Yeah,
just to kind of do a quick pitch. You know, I
yeah.
write books. These are my two horror books,
That's awesome.
Shadowfall, Carnival Night, The Crematorium. This one's a standalone novel. This one's an anthology of short stories. And then lately, I've also been writing more general fiction. So this one's actually really been blowing up on Amazon. It's bound by vines, but it's general fiction. And then I've got another general fiction story in the works and another horror story. And hopefully, we'll just keep going to film festivals with Sanguine Deposit.
Look at this. You got it all set up. You had it all like for the YouTube showing, right? Like you pick those up and
Got it all. Well, I knew we were
that
doing
was
this
awesome.
today, so I want to put my best foot forward.
All right, we'll link your Instagram as well, and basically people could check you out on the podcast. But like I said, let's like, keep creating, and it's amazing what you did.
Great. Well, thank you again for taking the time out today to be with me. I appreciate it.